Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is fine and safe wherever they are. And I would like to invite everybody to another afternoon of the roundtable of reimagining liberal arts and humanities education in the 21st century. This is the roundtable which we do every Thursday, and it is streamed live on our YouTube channel. And today we'll be talking about liberal arts and humanities. Now, liberal art education is a concept which is based on the principle that minds are like parachutes. They function best when they are open. And liberal education, therefore, is expected to open young mind, bodies, and souls of the students in graduate arts and science colleges and even higher education. And now this whole concept has been more accepted and adopted by Indian universities and also the NEP, which has been recently declared. So, with further ado, I really want to invite our esteemed panel members who are from different liberal art education universities. So, firstly, Professor Dishan Kamdar, who is the Vice Chancellor of Flame University. Good afternoon, Dr. Kamdar. Thank you
Hi,
for being with us.
glad to be here.
So Dr. Kamdar has done his PhD and MSc in management from NUS, which is the National University of Singapore. He was also the deputy dean with ISB. Um, and his specialization is negotiation analysis and decision making, something which I terribly enjoy. He's currently the vice chancellor of Flame University. So welcome, Professor Kamdar.
Pleasure. Pleasure.
Our our next guest today is Dr. Sundar Ramaswamy. He's the Vice Chancellor of Kriya University. He's a professional economist, an educator, and academic administrator with experience in both India and the United States. He is on leave from Middlebury College, one of the top ranked liberal arts institutions in the US. And he's now currently Vice Chancellor of Kriya University. So, welcome, Dr. Sundar. It's a pleasure having you here. Dr. Sundar, I think you're muted. Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next guest is Professor Kathleen Modrovsky. She's the Dean of Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities from OP Jindal Global University. Welcome, Professor Kathleen. It's a pleasure having you here. Professor Modrovsky was a consultant with UNESCO, and she has done her university studies at University of Toledo, Ohio. So welcome, Dr. Kathleen. It's a pleasure having you here. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. And our final guest for today is Dr. Rukmanjari Ghosh. She's the Vice Chancellor of Shiv Nadar University. She has also served as the Dean of School of Physical Sciences at JNU, New Delhi, and is the recipient of the Stree Shakti Science Samman for her original contribution to science. So, and she's currently the Vice Chancellor for Shiv Nadar University. So, welcome all of you. Welcome, Dr. Ghosh. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
So, we will quickly jump into the questions which I have. I really want to talk about how liberal education is being formed right now in India. How you all of your four universities are the leaders in liberal education right now. So for my first question, I want to talk to Dr. Kamdar. Dr. Kamdar, see, liberal arts, as you can say right now, is the buzzword, right? With everybody talking about it. The NEP has already implemented it. We are seeing a lot of sorry, not implemented it, has spoken about it. Implementation, well, let's see how that goes. But yeah, but there's a lot of buzz about liberal education in India. So for my first question is, what do you think has changed in the last 10 to 15 years, and what do you think will happen as this new NEP policy is implemented? Where do you think the challenges are, and where do you think the good things about the liberal education is coming into play? So it's now yours.
Yeah. So that's a great question, Shubhayu. Well, if we walk back the time clock, let's say we were back 10 years. When you if you were to speak about liberal arts in India, right? It is something very foreign. Students would think that you have been a dropout and you don't have any scope in life, and henceforth, you are joining something with regards to quote unquote arts, right? And that has been the fact, right? You speak to parents, kids have been, very, very excited about, spearheading their interest in art, social sciences, humanities, but they've been discouraged in the past, right? So you talked about the past 5 to 10 years. That was, how people conceive liberal arts, right? And I'm happy to say that Flame University has been, the first institution in India to offer liberal education, right? And it went back 12 years ago, and other institutes, follow suit 5 to 10 years later. But the fact has been that, liberal education, to set up a liberal arts institute, you need a lot of resources, right? You need to offer multiple majors, and more importantly, the student teacher ratio has to be very small because it's extremely interactive. Now, you can just imagine the startup costs, right? Now, back then, 10, 15 years ago, setting up a liberal arts institution, right, when the market is not ready. And why is the market not ready? Because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, Indian students, Indian parents, they have this mindset of ROI, right? So when we talk about other streams outside humanities, social sciences, and arts, there's a very clear, tangible ROI, which is, my placement, right? What kind of institutes come in and recruit you, and what kind of average salary the students get. Now, how do we quantify tangibly the ROI when we offer liberal arts education, right? So how do you quantify the amount of creativity we generate in students, right? So we make our students very creative. They are able to collaborate. They are critical thinkers. They are great communicators. They are resilient. They are adaptive. How do you? So it's been so difficult for us to convince parents the ROI, because we are not, getting students ready for a single job, but we are getting them ready for life, for multiple jobs, right? But thanks to digital technology, digital revolution, now recruiters. So back then, right, recruiters, when you ask them, what is the first thing that you're looking for when you hire someone, they're saying, what, deep functional expertise. I don't need transferable skills. Today, thanks to digitization, a lot of these functional skills have been outsourced, has been automated, and in this world of disruption, where everything gets obsolete so quickly. I was speaking to a few computer science students just 2 weeks ago, and I was telling them, you are in your first year. By the time you graduate, 50% of what you study will be obsolete. This is the world we're living in today. So recruiters right now are looking for transferable skills. Now the value of liberal arts has started to glow. Now, parents, students are understanding the ROI behind liberal education. So we are seeing the pendulum swing now, right? So there's more uptake and more because of this awareness, and thanks to digital transformation, thinking about the future, I think, it's just I think more and more institutes are going to be offering liberal education, and thanks to NEP now, right, they'll be forced to offer multidisciplinary education, which is where the current job requirements are, right? And I think we'll see more and more uptake going forward.
Thank you, Professor Kamdar. I want to bring the same question to Dr. Sundar as well. I want to know your opinion, especially I want to know how in the last 10 to 15 years, because you've come from the US, you've come to India, you're now with Kriya, and what are the differences? What are the challenges which you're seeing, which you're facing, especially when students? So something what Professor Kamdar said is placements is an important factor when it comes to students when they are choosing a university or a institution to go to, and has that mindset changed with parents, with students? How do you think that change is happening? So over to you.
Thank you, Subhayu. And I think Professor Kamdar set it up very well. I think the every idea has a certain moment in history, and I think because of pioneering efforts of places like Flame, it makes it possible. But there are also other changes that happened in society with technology and so on. I have come back to India now every year for my own research, and now I've been here for the last 5 years. But prior to that, when I started teaching in 1990 at a liberal arts institution, what was fascinating to me was this idea that students were so broadly trained across a range of disciplines before they start specializing. I had joined Delhi University as a student of economics, and all I studied was economics. And this idea that now as a professional economist, I think I can confidently say that I'm a better economist because I'm interested in mathematics and philosophy and physics and history, which I didn't study in college, but I picked it up much later. So this idea that today's problems rarely can be solved with just expertise in one discipline, I think we've all known it, but somehow the system forced you to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. And then if you decided not to take those tracks, you went to university, you decided you had to be a history major or a physics major, and then you had subsidiary subjects in which you could get barely passing marks, and it doesn't matter. What mattered was what you did in that one discipline. And if you loved it like I did, you could do well. But so many of my classmates did not like it, and then what are you prepared for? Because all you studied was one discipline. So I think it is right time for India, as in many other changes. And what always struck me, I would keep coming back as a professional economist and do work and see so many sectors of India change. And what always troubled me was that the higher education sector rarely changed in the 90s and the 2000s, compared to so many other sectors, whether it's automobiles, whether it's mobile telephony. We produce really good products. And of course, Indian students go abroad, they do really well. So why is it that the system here is not changing? And I think NEP is long time coming. One of the things that I want to piggyback on something Dishan said. It's a quote that I keep in sort of front of my mind. It was uttered about 100 years back. Where is the wisdom that is lost in all the knowledge? Where is the knowledge that's lost in all the information? To which I, as an economist, add, where is the information that's lost in all the data? So we are awash with data. And as Dishan said, ever since the invention of the popularization of the iPhone and the Androids, information is at everyone's fingertips, right? So this idea when I was going to school that teaching was filling an empty brain with information no longer is what students are paying for. I mean, they are paying to learn how to think and what to think, how to ask questions, how to connect the dots, this idea of information to knowledge and then knowledge to wisdom. So I think even this whole paradigm puts the emphasis on not just students, but also teachers on how do we teach. It's no longer the delivery of information because your student already has all the information at their fingertips before even they walk into class. So then the question is, how do you make use of that information? How do you make use of the data to create knowledge, and how do you become knowledgeable? And the last point is, I think, gone are the days when somebody gets out of college and joins a job. I mean, I think we are preparing, I think all liberal arts focused institutions prepare students, as I think everybody on this panel will say, not just for a job, but for multiple jobs and multiple careers. I mean, and I think the question of how to learn is really something I put a lot of stock in. It is not what to learn, because that is, as I said, found available on the internet. It's how to learn and how to unlearn and how to relearn, because what you learn today may be obsolete in 4 or 5 years' time in some fields. And the last point is, I think, something even we do at CREA very well is we were set up 2 years ago with a mission statement, preparing humanity for an unpredictable world. But I can guarantee you, when we are sitting up and writing that mission statement in 2017, we were not expecting the unpredictable world of 2020 with COVID. But the idea was the 21st century is going to be throwing so many unpredictabilities at us. And while we are looking towards the future, one of the things as humans we need to be aware of is there's a huge past behind us, which means history, if we ignore it, we tend to keep repeating the same mistakes. So one of those ideas, as you point out in your preamble, is the reason even the study of the past, which is what you would call history, or broadly understanding how humans fit into this world, is the humanities. I think those all are the fields that what liberal arts focus is. Even as you are focusing on the future, we cannot escape the past, because we need to understand it, to learn from it, to prepare our students so that they may make new mistakes. Let them not keep repeating the old mistakes. And the only way to do that is to understand a sense of the where ideas come from and the past is. And I think that's really what I hope, not just the institutions that are on this panel. I really hope what places like us are like in chemistry are the catalysts, and that we create the change. And now with NEP providing the impetus, the big legacy institutions start to rethink how education is approached at the higher education level in India.
Thank you, Dr. Sundar. Dr. Kathleen, now I would love your comments on this as well. I mean, I just want to know, you know, what impact is the new NEP going to have on the learning outcomes of students, especially when it comes to liberal arts education. So, your thoughts on that, Dr. Kathleen?
Sure. I'm still unsure about the implementation of the NEP. I think it's an enormous project and very interesting. Some of the things that struck me that I would like to see facilitated are the idea of communication and collaboration amongst institutions. I think that that's going to be something that will be very important if we're going to have the institution of learning hubs, as this is something that's written in the NEP format. So are we going to have learning hubs? I spent a lot of my time studying in France, and now they've moved away from the smaller single topic institutions into learning hubs. It's been a bumpy road there. Some of the better institutions, not better, but better projects have been things like the MIT Media Lab, which goes around the world actually and has learning hubs. We all know the Erasmus program as well. I think that that's something that could be really fundamental in sharing knowledge and creating a community of learners and of practitioners in India. So that's something that I feel is really outstanding. The other part that I feel is daunting is the question of equity and equality in education. You know, we all know that's a huge hurdle. I mean, we face those questions in our own program at Jindal School, OP Jindal Global University. How do we keep up the cost that was mentioned by Dr. Sundar of how much it costs to educate in a liberal arts way, using a format of liberal education, where, for example, we have a 1-to-7 ratio. How do you do that? How can you replicate that? Certainly, as was mentioned before, we could possibly use digitization, but that does not replace the way immersion takes place. What are the social connections that are created? And something I notice in our university and in other universities is there still is the question of caste, class, and gender. How are we going to overcome those? I'd like to see, I think it's really exciting to see how this is envisaged in the NEP project. So I think there's a lot of things. Just to reiterate, I think internationalization, cooperation, and equity and equality in education are 3 ways that I feel we should all concentrate. And then, of course, the underlying one is how are we going to finance this? Will it happen? We don't have in France, I don't see still that strong a donor base, building strong alumni affiliations, getting outside institutions to become donors in our institutions here. So those are all questions that are exciting. We certainly have the know-how to solve these problems. Do we have the willpower?
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kathleen. And now to Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh, I would love your comments on what the 3 panelists have already spoken. So I'm not going to repeat the question. I really want your views on how you think that, what's going to happen, what's the way forward.
Yeah, you have collected a great panel. After they've spoken, you did not ask me this. So I was actually listening very, very carefully. It's a great question, actually. So let me start with something that Kathleen actually has written in the chat box. But I've been saying this for quite some time that, liberal arts is not restricted to just arts as people understand it. So education in liberal arts generally refers to subjects of literature, philosophy, mathematics, social science, but as well as physical sciences. So it is not just arts, I call it liberal studies, as it allows a student to follow liberal pursuits free of boundaries and aims at breaking the mold of education in silos. That has been the model in this country, and before NEP, that still was the model. That's the education system in the country. Education in silos. You have ISARs for science, you have IITs for technology education, you have IIM for management. So education in silos. So I think liberal studies format basically is attacking that. There is some understanding that is emerging, and I think that has been discussed, and I completely agree with that. I just wanted to add one extra point maybe in there. Even before NEP, the understanding was there. If you look at the fact that in liberal arts, then therefore, or liberal studies, we are talking about a holistic approach to education, and that was the need of the hour. That I think people have started understanding, because real problems on ground demand real solution, and you need tools and concepts from multiple disciplines. So a broad-based education helps, and I have been saying this for a very long time now. But for example, and don't take it literally, but it's not like liberal arts is to serve the STEM subjects. That's not the point. But the point is that there is an understanding that for an engineer to be a real problem solver, which is by definition what engineering is supposed to be, he or she has to understand the context of the problem, right? Since one cannot find solutions without understanding the historical or social data, even with a grand knowledge of engineering, right? I mean, the fact that water flows in Fifth Avenue in New York and it doesn't flow in a slum in Delhi has nothing to do with hydrodynamic laws. So you have to understand the context for you to be able to solve problems. So this was understood that broad-based education is needed for real solutions. And I think liberal arts makes it, and I agree with Sundar, this is the right time. People have understood it, that if you do not open it up and if you just keep on teaching students in a prescriptive what, then the future is doomed. So the point I want to make before I go to the main point I'm making is that institutions, particularly in the private sector, still prefer not to get into hardcore sciences and engineering, because the research infrastructure, I know you'll talk about research later, because without that, the education is not complete. The research infrastructure for science and engineering is expensive. So I think it adds to the 2 points, that very good points that were made already, that in liberal arts framework, you need a very prestigious student to teacher ratio. You cannot have, less than 10 is better. And then because you're offering multiple streams, there is an expense already written in there. But if you add research to the tool of teaching, if research teaching is by research, then research infrastructure in certain disciplines is extremely expensive. So I think people prefer not to go to the full gamut of what I would call liberal studies, but I see that is the future of liberal education in India. It cannot be without science and engineering. This is the one problem I have. One fashion is to talk about the disruptive technologies. So AI, ML, etc., etc. The other hand, of course, there is liberal arts that everybody, the common people, talk about. In between, people are forgetting certain hardcore disciplines. Without that, there will be no progress. So I think you can't eat AI. You need solutions for energy. You need smart materials. You need solutions for health and sustainability over everything else. And this cannot happen unless you have a good mix of the disciplines that we have valued so far and something that we need to propagate. So it's not a very fashionable thing that we should talk about. And I think NEP does understand that. I feel the authors knew it very well. It is not to be taken lightly at all. It actually talks about the full gamut of subjects that we need to actually get into. Once you are good at in one subject, even if the context changes, you'll become good at another one. And that's the idea of what Sundar was also mentioning, that to be able to learn and then relearn. So often not unlearn so much these days, but relearn, and the capacity to learn is the main training that we are giving. And Einstein's words that have been used for ages now, that it's the training of the mind that this liberal arts education is all about. In 1921, when he said it, it's just the same. is the training of the mind and not the mastering of many pieces of information, because that's not really what education is. It's the training of the art mind is one skill that's never going to go obsolete when every other skill is changing. So in some way, in not in a one-on-one fashion, you can even get to the accountability part that was hinted at. And I think that's where I'll end. So training of the mind is something that's never going to go obsolete. If the future of work is in question, that machines are going to take over human jobs, then we need to figure out what humans are good for, and higher education system cannot have an output that would just mimic machines of the future. So I think what humans are really good for is creativity, social intelligence, and so on and so forth. That curriculum, the liberal arts does that. It actually in some way mixes up your left brain, which is very logical, to the right brain, which is visual and intuitive. The right brain is not being coded. It's going to be a few years at least. I don't see it when you'll have computer algorithms taking over your right side of the brain's function. So I think if a comprehensive curriculum mixes this, if you have project-based learning, if you emphasize on design, for example, and not just STEM, but STEAM with an art and design symbolically, putting in there, it's an integrated curriculum, that is the future of liberal arts for me. And that's what we, for example, are trying to do at Shivnada University since we started in 2011. Of course, much young and much more to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. So, Dr. Ghosh, you also spoke about research. Okay, so I'm going to get that next question to you directly. Okay, I mean, in context of liberal arts and humanities, I just want to know what do you think is research is going to play a role in this scenario? What's your views on this one, please?
Yeah. So yes, I think there are of course definite signs of improvement in the country. I personally believe that research-based training, research-based teaching is the best form, and research doesn't make you competent for a career just in research, not just in academia. If you want to go to industry, R&D, and not you don't want to be a service person but a leader, research helps because it trains you in the nuances of thinking afresh. If you go as an entrepreneur, it helps. So research, I see it everywhere, and I think before I come to the serious points, it's fun. Students have fun learning when they're learning through exploration. And so this is something I think liberal studies program do talk about, because it teaches students to think critically and then of course communicate their ideas clearly. These are the skills that are valuable in any field. So I feel that research is, there is a perfect synergy between teaching and research. You need to find that. Not for every subject. Textbooks are written maybe every 50 years and you don't change it every day. But there are subjects and where, excuse me, we need to actually get into this very, very quickly. So the entire resource that we talked about, the entire training of teachers that was alluded to, I think that is needed in this area more than ever, because it's not information. It's really the art of thinking differently, what you're trying to teach, and that's what research is all about. If you don't mind, what for me the old wisdom, I sort of say it differently. Wise people are those who know and they know that they know, right? And for me, the stupid people are those who do not know but they think they know, and the world is full of them. So that leaves the rest. The intelligent people are the ones who do not know. They know precisely what they do not know. And when you do not know what you do not know, you start getting into research. So it's much of it is defining the problem of what exactly you do not know. And I think this is how research progresses. And I think the entire liberal studies, or what I'm calling liberal studies, but liberal arts philosophy, is to do this: creative problem solving, critical thinking, and of course, communication is part of all of this. So I think it's extremely important. And in India, thanks to these leading institutions, we are all in it. I don't sort of separate it out. Our undergraduate teaching is research based. Even undergraduates get into serious research by a program that I call OUR, our program, Opportunities for Undergraduate Research. It's not for everybody, it's not inside the curriculum. You don't get credit for it, but a student is free to choose any mentor from SNU. You don't have to stick to your own discipline. And if you have a problem, we fund it. I give small money for 2 semesters, and they work it out, and they can carry it. So second year, third year, these are extremely popular projects, and in the end, there's some competition. There's a nice undergraduate conference we do. So I think the culture has to be built from bottom up. We kill their curiosity, we kill their ability to ask relevant questions in the school level when you are just because children do ask questions a lot when they're born, after when they start talking, but then we kill that. But you need to channelize those random questions into directions like I mentioned for research to flourish. And for me, it's almost definitional. A good university is the one that produces more knowledge than it consumes. It's not my original quote, but a friend's quote, and I strongly believe in that. So knowledge generation is what research is all about, and that sort of defines all of us. I strongly believe it's still pretty much true, but I'll be waiting to hear others. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Kathleen, your view on research within liberal arts education. I mean, what do you think is the way forward, or what do you think we are not doing enough right now in terms of doing research within liberal arts?
Well, I think that Dr. Ghosh mentioned it. Valuing undergraduate research is really important. So the whole notion that Dewey and Frary put forward, the mind is an empty container, you have to fill it. Well, you don't. People already have lots of ideas. Young people have ideas. And I believe that the classroom, working in the field, are the places where new knowledge is created. So this is the idea of collaborative learning. Students and faculty collaborate with each other and with people in the community. That is research. I feel that the demystification of research is very important. You don't need a laboratory. You need a way of thinking to do research. We all do research. You're going to buy a car. You're going to rent a house. Break it down and see what are the research questions that are involved. So research in the undergraduate program is very important. At our university, we do have 40 different research centers. From undergraduate students second year on, we encourage them to go to one of the research centers, work, produce a paper, present. We've sponsored for 4 years now the undergraduate research conference. I am just amazed because we have over 35 Indian universities participating. And what students, undergraduates produce is really heartening, giving them the chance, validating their ideas, being roughly critical with the panel is a very healthy sort of instinct to go forward. I would like to say that organizing your classes so that they are based on critical thinking, inquiry, and experiential learning, then being able to analyze what you're doing are essential elements. I'd like to go back to one of your first questions, though, and this is really something that's important, is that the schools are changing. What would be the equivalent of the schools before university. Many of the private schools and some of the public ones are emphasizing this idea of collaborative, of experiential learning. So I do believe that's part of sensitizing students and their families to the value of research. Having students write, having them publish, taking them seriously is very important, and creating a forum where ideas can be tried out, opening up certain areas so that you can do collaborative learning within multiple disciplines. I believe that multiple disciplinary interdisciplinarity are a key to what we're going to be facing, we are facing now. So what we have is students in our program take 4 courses in which you have professors who are co-teaching from different domains. And this is very interesting. It leads to conflict. It leads to debate in the classroom. And it shows that you can approach a topic in solving a problem from various point of views. The idea is which one is going to fit into the context you're working in. So those are all areas that are very important. We have really by popular demand in JGU launched a new program, which is not a 4th-year program. It's a year-long program, the Jindal Fellowship Program, devoted entirely to research, new forms of research, and then 5 months of independent research with a mentor, who is someone who takes on the student to work on a specific research topic. Oftentimes students feel that in graduate school, they're a little bit disappointed when they go on for their master's degrees, that they do not have that independence to do research that was afforded to them in undergraduate. So I think research is something that is a key word, a key concept. I think that we as educators have to broaden our notion of what research is and implement it in cooperation with our students into the curriculums.
Thank you, Dr. Kathleen. So, Dr. Sundar, I want to keep continuing in the same line of thought, especially in terms of research. There's a reason, we are seeing a lot of, so like Dr. Kathleen said, they have 40 centers for research. I'm assuming Trier also has a center for research and innovation. And, we want those students. So, we have the liberal arts students being more entrepreneurial, more service oriented, more towards, like Dr. Ghosh said, thinking from the right side of the brain. So in that scenario, how do you think that setting up such centers is going to help your students create, or give them that extra edge, or create that difference when they graduate? So maybe your thoughts on that. I think you are muted. So
we listened to you very carefully. Your instructions that said when you're not speaking, mute, and we forget that sometimes. No, I wanted to share what my previous 2 colleagues, both Kathleen and Rupa, said. Great universities are centers of knowledge production. They disseminate it, but they produce knowledge, and that's what our aspiration should be. Even when we're setting up these places in India, and certainly at CREA, we certainly had that lofty ambition. And research happens in multiple ways. It can happen, as you point out, it can happen through the creation of centers which are focused on a particular topic, for instance, or it can happen because the entire university fosters both excellence in teaching and research, and they're 2 sides of the same coin in my view. And for research, you need time and money, which means the university administration needs to give time to its faculty to be able to do research, and it needs to resource it with money for conferences, lab equipment, or just partnering with other collaborators and so on. So that's faculty research, and providing a welcoming environment for colloquia and seminars and fostering that research culture. I also think that undergraduate, especially because right now CREA is undergraduate, we do have a graduate program in business. Undergraduate research is very, very, also very important. And at CREA, every student will end up doing a capstone thesis or a project by the time they have to graduate. And I think it's fascinating for undergraduates to be able to do research either individually, or collaboratively, or with the faculty. And when we're all growing up, Subayu, we all, I remember English proverb, curiosity kills the cat. I have no idea where that proverb came from. I wish it was thrown into the dustbin, because at some point we completely put a negative idea on this idea of being curious. And I always think the best student or the best faculty colleague is somebody who forever remains curious, because that is what makes you a really good researcher. It's always saying, what am I curious about? How do I find the answer to this problem? Where do I go looking for it? How do I consult other disciplines? How do I collaborate with other faculty in other disciplines to solve a particular problem? So curiosity is something that we should actually celebrate. And that leads to creativity and critical thinking and everything else that others have talked about, right? So now you could have the university foster research like some of the top universities in the world do. And I think some of the universities in India are really moving in that direction. There's another way also within that, and these are not mutually exclusive, where you can actually create centers which are funded either by outside support or internal support, and you seek grants. And the centers tend to focus on a particular theme, whether it could be in biotechnology, whether it could be in poverty alleviation, it could be a very thematic center, or it could be a center on AI. I mean, so there are different ways of doing this. I don't think it's necessary that you need to have centers to do research. At the same time, I don't think it's certainly bad to have centers. In fact, it's a great way for you seeking support from government agencies or donors who want to advance a particular cause. But I think the stepping back, I think your question is overall the attitude from the top, which is the governing council, the vice chancellor, the deans, the senior faculty, is that we take research seriously, we value research, and we will hold it seriously when we are reviewing faculty. So this is something we haven't yet talked about, is how do you produce the faculty that will create the next generation of scholars? And for that, the review procedures and how do you evaluate them, and what is the bar that faculty have to cross in order to maintain excellence in teaching and research? Because the idea is not to get a faculty who's fantastic today. The idea is to get a faculty member who's fantastic 10, 15, 20 years also from now. And if you continue to have curious minds, they continue to evolve and they keep changing, and they become even more interesting as researchers 20 years later than when they got their PhDs. And which means they become really good colleagues as faculty for your generation of students you're admitting in 2040, right? So it's not enough to just focus on the here and the now. Your research is a lifetime marathon, academics is a marathon. And when we are hiring faculty, we'll also realize that some faculty will not make it, and that is okay. I mean, because the idea of universities is precisely to produce excellence and innovation, and focusing on research allows you to do that, just like focusing on teaching allows you to do that. And I think we have to be recognizing the constraints that we place on people, whether it's in terms of time or money or resources. And as long as we try and keep alleviating those constraints, I think you actually create an environment where people should take research seriously. And I like the word Dr. Ghosh used, which is have fun. I always think, when students come and ask me about research projects, I always tell them, find something that you're going to enjoy learning about, not just do it because it's a chore. That's what an assignment is. A research project is something you should just have a lot of fun. It might be stressful, but at the end of the day, you look back and say, I think I've made a contribution, no matter how small, right? And I think that, and we should encourage all kinds of pure research, applied research, multidisciplinary research, and try, and it's easier said than done, try and remove some of the politics out of evaluating research. It's never easy. It's never going to happen. But I think the more we try, I think universities ultimately will advance.
Thank you, Dr. Sundar. I completely agree with you on the curiosity killed the cat part. Professor Kamdar, your views, please, on research. I've actually been to Flame University. I've met one of your colleagues, and every time I go to your university, I've had a chance to speak to some of the students, and they speak very highly about research. So I do see that culture has been imbibed within the students. But I want your opinion also about research, about how you are changing the face of research within your university. So your thoughts, please.
Sure. Well, my esteemed panelists have, said a lot about research, and so I will not repeat what they've mentioned. But at the epicenter of any university has to be thought leadership. Research is very important. Exactly at the student level and at the faculty level as well. If you want to be a great teacher, you want to teach cutting edge. You don't want to teach from cases this which are dated, right? So it is a mandate at Flame University that every faculty that we hire has to be a knowledge creator, and then you disseminate the knowledge, right? You just cannot be disseminating knowledge without creating that knowledge. So for research to be taken seriously, we need three things in place: providing the resources for the faculty, providing infra for the faculty, and also the incentives, right? So three things will go hand in hand, right? We have to be incentivized. Yes, great, but I mean, think about the state of research in India over the past 20, 30 years, right? The fact is, faculty have not been incentivized, and henceforth we rather go to companies and be consultants rather than spend our time doing hard copy or research, right? So it has to be incentivized. Now, so first of all, we need to provide resources, and as my panelists mentioned, institutions, right? The governing board, and all of us, the vice chancellors, the deans, have to provide sufficient funding for faculty. There should be no dearth for funding, right? You cannot say, I want good quality, publication. I want something that is cutting edge, but I don't have the money to fund you, right? So you've got to walk your talk. I've seen a lot of institutions, harping about research, but budget issues. You can't have budget issues, right? So number one, you need to have a generous pool of internal funding, right? Which we at Flame, the board has been committed, and so far we have not turned any research proposals down, right? And we hope to continue that momentum. So for the funding, at Flame, what we do have is, faculty development fund. So every faculty has a fixed amount of money, irrespective of your area of specialization, is irrespective to your research productivity as well. You can use that fund, right, to hire RAs, to hire TAs, to attend conferences, do whatever you want, but it has to augment research, right? So you have internal funding, you have research budgets given. At the same time, faculty are encouraged to source funding from government grants and request FRPs from the corporate world as well. Now, in terms of infrastructure, and liberal arts, given the entire wide gamut of specialization, different majors that we cater to, right? In some areas, you just need to invest in those labs. You cannot expect faculty to churn out, papers without, having that infrastructure made available. Not every research requires field study, right? So investment in those labs are key, right? So we do have multiple labs at Flame University. For example, we have the psychology lab, right? For our finance students, we have the lab for investments, right? Investment center, basically, which has all the databases, from the stock market, basically, right? And we also need to incentivize. I think that's the key, right? Your career progression within the academic life that you have will be very much a function of the quality and number of papers, citation counts. It's very difficult to quantify them, right? But it is possible. It's been mentioned that there are politics within institutions, right, that would qualify a paper as an A or an A minus or a B, but you need to fix that out. But you need to incentivize. If you have people who are producing research, you've got to incentivize them further, give them more funding, give them more money, right, and get them to mentor junior faculty as well. Now, that is the faculty side. Now, if you think about students, you met our students, right? And end of the day, we at Flame, we believe in experiential learning, and the center stage of a student's learning will be a function of the multidisciplinary research that they get into, which is focused on real life problems. So I'll just give you one example. We have a program called the Discover India program, which every student at Flame has to get into. So, we group them from across disciplines, and we ask them to find a problem facing humanity, which is social and cultural as well. And they conduct both primary and secondary research, coming back with their faculty, writing a mini thesis out of it. And, it has been such a valuable experience for each and every one of them, because they are not only thinking, they are thinking across disciplines, and, they are collaborating with each other, and they develop empathy, because going back, traveling. So we don't allow our students to travel by flight. You have to travel by train, go to that village, collect your data, meet people, come back, and first-hand experience of life in villages, it's just a humbling experience for our students as well. So yes, I would agree with my colleagues. Research has to be at the epicenter of any university. We have to be knowledge creators, and in the undergrad space especially, the entire curriculum should also build around research exposure, solving real world problems for our students.
Sorry. Thank you, Professor Kamdar. Now, you spoke about faculty members, and that's something which I want to come back to, right? So now, faculty members, you said they need to be incentivized, and the challenge which we are seeing is these faculty members. So see, they have the certain skills, and they need to pass on these skills to their students. How do you think that you would make your faculty members more up to date? More, I would say, upgrade their skills in terms of when it comes to this kind of an education. How do they pass it on to students? Because I'm seeing a lot of faculty members, and they do tend to stick to the book. Okay, and you said that you are looking at knowledge creators within your faculty members, right? So would you want to talk a little bit about that? Tell us a little bit more in terms of how would you think that institutions can incentivize their faculty members to do more, to bring that kind of spark within students, right?
Yes. So I think there are a couple of ways to do it, right? I think the first point revolves around incentives again, right? So if you want to grow in your career, right, you got to produce, right? You got to showcase thought leadership. You got to write, articles, right, in the papers. You got to write book chapters, right? So we do not discriminate. So at the same time, you bring in flexibility while still being rigid about outcomes. So find your love, find whatever you're comfortable in doing, find your own outlet, but it has to be a premium outlet, right? What we do at Flame, it's also have we do have collaborations with top tier liberal arts institution. I'll just give you an example. We have very close relationships with Amherst and Wellesley. Now, what we do is we cater to faculty exchange between our school and their school, where we get some of our seniors to travel to those institutions and their seniors to just spend some time at Flame University, interact with our faculty, and work and collaborate with them. There's so much of exchange that can happen, right, via such faculty transfers. And I realize at Flame, it has really helped us incentivize research and up our research game by such faculty collaborations. I have been very vocal about this, and I'm going to say this again. Part of our big mission at Flame is to be the sabbatical capital for any faculty across the world to park themselves at Flame University. So we have been funding, and we will continue to fund faculty who would want to spend some time at Flame during your sabbatical, during your research time off. Come to Flame, spend some time interacting with our students, work on research projects with our students, work on research, interesting cutting-edge research with our faculty, right? And we will fund all those research projects. And that has been a big game changer for us.
All right. Thank you, Professor Kamdar. Dr. Sundar, I want to come back to you about this again. So, especially from the faculty perspective, what are your thoughts on this, please?
No, I think, Subhayu, I agree with what Professor Dishan has said. It's a slow but steady process of how committed the institution remains. It starts off by how serious the institution is when you hire your faculty, right? How do you hire them? And where do they come from? How do you evaluate them? So that's the first part. The second is how not everybody learns to become a great teacher, or everybody learns, maybe they learn some amount of great research because they've done their PhD, but it doesn't mean they themselves don't need further learning, right? So institutions have to remember that faculty need support, mentoring, their own professional development, and finding ways to incentivize them to continue to be producers. After all, really good, serious faculty chose the academy for a reason. So how do you help them become that, right? So it starts with hiring. Then how do you evaluate and review the people who you want to continue with you? And also, after giving enough tries to people, some people may not be able to stay on if your standards are very high, but nevertheless you need to give everybody a fair shot. And then that could be many years later than from the time you hire them. And so the idea of research then becomes more and more ingrained. And there's a lot that happens by demonstration. So when you have senior faculty who are equally excited about research, when you have administrative deans excited about research, or even the vice chancellors, then it sends a signal that the university takes this seriously. Students realize that you take this seriously. And then when you bring in collaborators, whether they are faculty on sabbaticals or just because you have partnerships with universities around the world, you realize that you're part of a much larger intellectual community, which doesn't necessarily stop at India's borders. It cuts across nations, and you have collaborators, and then you become part of much larger research networks. And I think it's that whole attitude towards research and the kinds of faculty we bring, and that becomes a very sort of positive sum cycle, because that it's a virtuous cycle, because they in turn become continue to remain really good teachers, continue to excite students about the disciplines, teach them what's the cutting edge, and students then learn to love the discipline, and they don't have to become PhDs. I mean, I think all of us would agree that we are not there for our students to become like us. If it's great if some of them have the aptitude to become PhDs and academics and so on. But I want them, whether they go and become a civil servant, or they go and become a non-profit or volunteer, or they go and join India Inc. as a corporate honcho, it doesn't matter. The education they get from these places, the kinds of research skills they will have, that will stand them in great stead. And so I think it starts with the kind of faculty that you bring to push the mission of the university, not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 20, 30, 40 years and longer.
Thank you, Dr. Sundar. Dr. Kathleen, do you want to? Sorry about that. Dr. Kathleen, I just want your opinion as well, because see, you've spoken a little bit about the number of research centers you have. So there's definitely a huge amount of research which is being done in OP Jindal. There is also one question which one of our viewers is asking: is how do you open so many research centers? How is budget allotted? And what kind of industrial projects are you doing? So maybe your thoughts on this would be really appreciated. The question is asked by Somana Datta.
Okay, bringing in collaborators from the outside is something that we are working on. Certain centers, for example, those dealing with business, those dealing with banking and finance, those centers that are dealing with, let's say, persuasive opinion building, are getting outside funding, and they're getting outside commissions. Within the university, we really have a very generous program of supporting faculty development. Every faculty member is allowed one international visit to attend a colloquium. You're supposed to present a paper at these, and the obligation to publish is encouraged. But what we really feel, and this has been voiced already, is understanding that faculty are a part of a larger intellectual community is very important. So those are ways that we go about it. Again, faculty do have an obligation to teach 2 courses a year, which is not onerous, really. It allows them 1 full day a week besides the weekends for doing research. And then after 3 years on working at the university, many faculty ask for a semester off to do their research. And this goes through research board. So I think it's really encouraged, as well as bonuses that are given to everyone with Scopus published articles. This is contested a bit, because in the fine arts, you're going to consider that your exhibit, your performance will not go into Scopus reviewed article, but at the same time kind of pushes people to change the format and go into philosophy and art to get publication. I believe that this has a very positive effect of having faculty look in other directions. As was mentioned before, exchange with faculty from other countries, from other schools is really important. Because for one thing, those faculty members from, say, the United States, the UK, Australia, build relationships not only with faculty and encourage joint research projects, but with our students. I think the students work very closely with visiting faculty. One area of research that I feel has been ignored is pedagogy. You know, and maybe we're going to talk about that later, but moving into digital formats, we're still doing what, to get folksy about it, we're putting old moonshine in new bottles. And, you know, this idea of trying to do as instructors, as researchers, communicating what we're doing in the same format really is going to take another kind of language. How do we translate the way we work and think digitally into a format that's going to be communicative? So I believe that this whole idea of developing new pedagogies, and that's theory of teaching, is very important. Also, putting more emphasis on research into the way we teach, writing about it, disseminating this information is something that's very important that we need to validate more than it really is. Those are my ideas.
Okay, I think that's brilliant. I really liked your thoughts on this one. Dr. Ghosh, now I'm going to ask you a question which is being asked over here, and I really want your opinion on this. So this is by Mr. VJ Byra Reddy. So he's saying, what jobs do you think will you see opening up for liberal arts graduates in the next 10 to 15 years? That's a very generic question. But I would really like to know a little bit from your behalf in terms of, are you seeing a shift to a particular scenario? So let me give you an example. So now most of the IITs have already have some sort of liberal arts programs which are running. So for example, IIT Kharagpur already has a school of law, but we are not seeing a lot of law graduates coming out from IIT Kharagpur and doing something different. So what do you think is the direction which will go in terms of finding the right jobs for graduates in the next 10 to 15 years?
Right. I think I'll preface it. We are running out of time, so I'll preface it with something that you have been discussing. Everybody is talking about the need for resources. I think to do all the things we are talking about, we need, in my opinion, two things: resources and leadership. And this is about enabling what all we are trying to talk about. Of course, so this goes a long way. I'll start with the direct question you asked, and then I'll expand that a bit. So, a liberal studies program of the kind I talked about, and I've said this already, it trains the mind to think out of the box, right? So it teaches students to think critically and communicate their ideas clearly, which are skills valuable in any field. So that's the pretext. So you're familiar with vocational degree, where people invested a lot. So while I would say a vocational degree prepares students for a single career, and that's what we started with that discussion, the kinds of which are disappearing, those kinds are disappearing. So liberal studies gives them skills that are needed for a number of high-end jobs today. I mean, I did not prepare this examples I could have looked up, but I remember this. Microsoft has an entire content experiences team that helps design multiple personalities for its virtual AI assistant, Cortana, right? Everybody's using it. So if you look at media reports some time back, Indian conversational AI startups have almost 10% of their core team members from the liberal arts background. So I'm not saying AI is something, I've already expressed my opinion, but if the market is considering only those kind of jobs, there are ample examples to say how they are not choosing, typical computer science graduates. They're looking at people, that at least 10 to 20% of their core team members should be from liberal arts background. I'm just making the argument. So even in these fashionable new age things where you think technology should dominate, the demand is for a 10 to 20% of liberal arts background humanities students, creative specialists. A friend of mine called me up some time back to say that for they're not no longer looking at MBA finance for finance jobs. He hired a physics graduate, and he called me up to say I've hired a because you do not want somebody coming with a preconceived notion of what it should be all about. So they want a thinking individual who has the basic skills all right, and they want to experiment with ideas. And I think that's where high end things are going. If you're not looking to replace robots to do day-to-day jobs, and that's what then you still do vocational, the few remaining cases that we know in India, it's going to take a while for those jobs to disappear, but I'm seeing signs of those jobs disappearing. High-end jobs, even the cases where the two examples I gave, where you do not expect liberal arts to shine, that's where liberal arts is still is shining. So I think it's really the entire world is your field when you have got that critical thinking skills acquired. And I wanted to actually say that the why I brought in leadership, because all of these things should be when you lead by example, and that has been talked about. The research, um, uh, driving teaching, the entire pedagogy is through research. That happens, and then you have to balance out a few things, and that has not been talked about. And I thought I'll mention that because you're also from QS. That one is that there is always research for me is a quest for new knowledge, right? That doesn't need really any separate justification. So as a leader, we'll have to prioritize and sort of balance these priorities. So combining, maybe not balancing. Balance is a bad word. It gives me a sense of mediocrity. But maybe combining priorities of the such abstract knowledge generation, which we call research and excellence, and relevant research. For example, if I want the contribution of science, research, innovation for inclusive economic growth agenda, right? So there has to be a balance in these two. They're not either or, they are both. And that combining these priorities is our job. We also need high risk innovations, right? High risk research. If everybody follows the parameters that are set for measuring excellence, be it by ABCD, ABDC journals, or Scopus, the way I do impact factors, then people will stop taking risk, right? Because high risk innovation would just all die. So we also have another priority that we need to balance, not balance, but combine global views versus local agenda, demographic view. So global universal is all right, but I call SNU global because we are highly rooted in our context, local context. So this needs protection. If you have general parameters of the kind people are talking about for faculty evaluation, then this would disappear because it's high risk. It's also, I'm doing some local work in UP fields, who cares, right? You don't get into Scopus high publication range. So this needs protection, and this is where leadership comes into effect. So I think all of this, the job market, of course, particularly as a private player, I'm highly conscious of students paying fees coming to the university. So I need to protect their future in our limited capacity. So I'm not leaving out employability considerations at all, but it's something beyond that we are all aware of. So I think we need to keep that in mind, combine all these different priorities. Don't get hung up on measuring things only by one way. If you do that, that's the end of all research, because that is an abstract knowledge seekers paradigm. And also you would also kill everything that has any risk in it. And so essentially you'd kill innovation. So I think we need to be aware of all of it. We manage it. We train our students. We are fortunate to have an Atal Incubation Center, one of the first in the country to be supported by Niti Aayog, apart from our own, which are industry specific, and some very exciting ones like what we call or CPACT, for example, Center for Public Affairs and Critical Theory. No money, but water science and policy program is based in there. This is the need of the hour for India 2017 onwards. I'm doing this master's program on water science and policy. So what are science and policy graduates? What, this is also part in our bigger framework. What, it's really creating these areas where expertise was missing, right? So they would also fill in certain way. So we need to have both. You need to have both. And because the future is little uncertain, some things we know we have immediate needs of, like water, but then there are other things that will come in the next 10 years we have no idea about. And they would be future ready only when they know how to think. So if the context changes, they would also be able to change with the context. So that's the employability guarantee from Shivnadar, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. I think maybe what you wanted to also say was probably innovation is also very key in terms of creating future ready students who are more employable. So I want to go back to Dr. Kathleen. Dr. Kathleen, do you want to take a stab in this? And probably we'll be winding up in another 5 to 10 minutes. I have one or two more questions, so we'll try to keep it as short as possible, right, Dr. Kathleen?
Okay, but could you state your question again, please?
Oh, sure. So, Dr. Kathleen, what I'm trying to say is, with students, employability and how employability in the next 10 to 15 years for liberal arts students, how is that going to be affected? Are they future ready?
Well, we have students in our program taking 3 courses that are really interesting. Besides an internship, all of our students must take 4 internships, which are graded, and they do reports on them. It sounds like it's pretty pro forma, but it isn't, because they can delve into a variety of areas and be comparative in them. The courses that are and many, I'll add this, with the internships, many of our students remain in contact with the internship directors, which is very interesting because they see the cycles of change in these internships. They're asked to look at present and future plans and projects at these, whether it is sort of a bricks and mortar type of organization, now online, community action. Our students are still directed to maintain contact with these organizations. The courses that I found very valuable are design thinking, which I mentioned before. And all students must take the design thinking course. What does that teach? That teaches that there are no single answers. There are problems that need to be solved. And it is a wonderful exercise in mental acrobatics, trying to figure out what could be multiple solutions, and then figuring out afterwards who's going to win based on debate in the class as the best solution to a given problem. So that's very good. We've just started 2 very new subjects in our courses. One is complexity studies, and complexity studies is something that really goes into innovation speculation on the future, and it has the very confusing basis of looking at the real depth, history, and context of the way knowledge is created. Another course that we do have that's open to students is looking at new research techniques. And this is something that goes way out of left field. I mean, you can look at the implementation of AI in solving every problem. You can also look at the way in which speculation, historically speaking, has failed. So it's important to look into the past. What were the presuppositions in research that were considered to be the basis of knowledge, the basis of decision making? What are future projections? How do we judge things now in a certain fluidity of time as being accurate and which has failed? So those are the important areas that we do go into. We are also thinking, and employability, that was the main question. Actually, it's pretty practical. Our Office of Career Services runs ongoing and required seminars for students. How to look at your career in different time slots: immediate, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So it's an imagination process. Secondly, how to present yourself in various forms. And this is really, how do you present yourself to the public? Certain looking at mock interviews and looking at how to write statement of purpose. Most important is looking at your experience. Based on that experience, how do you figure out what you want to do? I am a firm believer, and I think that in my long career teaching, if you're doing what you want to do, you're going to find a way to do it. You may not be the wealthiest person on earth, but you may be happy. I think the oft quoted quote is, the mind, you want to prepare your mind to be a good place to live the rest of your life. And I feel that this is a very important idea. Not to say that we all should be paupers and give up, but understanding as a student, as a human being, what's important to you, what really matters. For some, it may be to be the richest kid on the block. For another person, it may be to do good in humanity. We prefer that people are employable, but also, do good in humanity. That's part of our vision and of the mission of the university. So we try and foster this with our students, help them with employment, either through graduate school. 90% of our students are going to go on to graduate school or undergrads in liberal arts. And they come back and say, what should I do next? Help me. We're there to help. The Office of Career Services is there to help. Building a strong alumni network is something, we're a young university, that's really important as well. But I do not find that our students, and they come from a privileged background too, let's face it, they do not have trouble finding jobs, because not only do they have university connections, they've got family connections, which they mine. And also international experience is something that is very, very helpful. So yeah, we have a good track record of students who are unemployable. Those who go on to graduate school are quite successful. I do not have any instances where a student has been 100% refused in what they want to do in the future. But I guess that's going to change as we get more and more students coming in our university. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Kathleen. I am also a firm advocate of design thinking, and I just want to give a quick example of how a company which was made by a bunch of IIT grads decided to use liberal arts students, because what they did was they created an AI chatbot in vernacular languages, so different Indian languages, and they had to take help from liberal arts students in linguistics to translate and create that whole process. So this was a very good example which I found online. Probably you guys can have a look at it. I have now time for only 2 questions, and I'm going to ask one to Dr. Sundar and one to Dr. Kamdar. Dr. Sundar, I know you have to leave, so I'm going to start with you. There is one question by Satish. He says, how do you propose to adapt the new normal? So I'm assuming that he's talking about the COVID scenario, where we are going to have the digital and blended learning for liberal arts programs. So probably a quick answer for that one, and I would really love your thoughts on that. So, I think you're muted.
My mistake. I said I would like to retire the word new normal because we use it so often. But I do think the question itself is a very important one, that because we're going through this for the last 6-7 months, and chances are we will go through this for another, I don't even know how long, that we will adjust as society, as humanity will adjust. I think all of us already have gone online. Many institutions have gone online. And I think all of it, when I talk to my own colleagues, and the reason I have to run is because I got to go teach my class, is I think online is not the same as taking what you did in the classroom and putting it on Canvas or TCS Ion or some platform. We all know that. So I think there will also be a complete sort of rethink on how do we teach online? What is the pedagogy of online delivery? We have had online for a long time. I remember back the days of the MOOCs, Project Minerva, Coursera. I mean, you name it. There have been lots of places that are doing, even regular universities have been going online. But I think what this particular pandemic will show as we come out of it is there will be things that we may want to not, we may want to keep because of the way online works, maybe pedagogically better for certain disciplines and certain ways of teaching. And I think there is actually a lot of value in how we reimagine pedagogy of online delivery as we come out of this pandemic, and even maybe not embrace what life was in early March 2020, when all of us were teaching all our students in sort of in classrooms. And I do think, because we have been through this for quite some time now, that I think it's just the human nature to adapt to this. And I hope we adapt in a good way. I also think there are certain elements, especially in smaller institutions like everyone who's represented here, where the students really learn a lot by the connections they have with their other peers and by the faculty. And not all of that can be replicable. So I think what we will end up doing, Subayu, is we'll sort of take what works in the online from the online world and bring it forward post pandemic and blend it with what used to work traditionally. And and it may be different for different disciplines. So for an arts teacher versus a science teacher versus a math teacher, again, there's a bit of a difference. And I think that's the beauty of the whole exercise of there's no one size fits all. But I do think the questioner's question is really spot on, in that I don't see us, even at a place like Korea, let's say if we are all able to come back full time on site by whatever month, that we would just forget these last 6 or 7 months. I actually think there's a lot of value that'll come out of this. And I think some version of blend is the way forward. It's what version of blend. I think each university will make that choice. How much on site versus how much online. I don't see us completely going back fully on site. I also don't see us completely abandoning that, because that is really what has been tried and tested. But I think there'll be a lot of value from certain elements of online that will actually be very, very helpful and may open up new avenues, new kinds of students, new hours in the day, reaching out to collaborators who are not in Sri City or Chennai, which is where we are located, but actually bring them through Zoom or Teams or others. So I think there are other ways, and the human mind is incredibly adaptable in imagining. And I think we will use this constraint as a way to imagine. And I hope that's really the way we learn from this.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sundar. I think you have a class to go to. So
thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Education
Dr.
is
Sundar,
still
for
very
joining us
important.
today.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. Bye. See you. So, Dr. Kamdar, my last question is for you, and this is from one of our gentlemen who has joined on YouTube. He said that I've heard that liberal arts education enables a person to pursue almost any career because it teaches one to think critically. Is this an overstatement? I would love your views on this one.
Well, yes and no, right? Yes and no. If you really think about what has happened over the past year and what's happening today, right? As we get into the next decade, right? We've used the word VUCA all the time, VUCA, correct? It's been a common acronym, right? So the context that we live in today, the job market today, our environment today, it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous, right? And that's our context today, right? Which is and it's just going to get more and more complex with the passage of time. Again, thanks to disruption and automation and business process outsourcing. Now, if you ask any employees, right, what kind of people you want and what kind of skills they need, right? Because the question is very one relevant to the job market. I'm asking and I'm responding, with respect to the needs of the hour. Now, if you ask any employees, what kind of values do you want from your people, given the VUCA world, they would say, first of all, I want someone who is culturally sensitive, right? Because it's a global workplace right now. You should be able to work with different cultures. You should be able to work virtually. You should be able to collaborate, right? You want someone who is, sensitive about societal issues. You want someone who embraces empathy. You want someone who is, sensitive about environmental issues. Now, these are the values that employees are looking for today. It's a no-brainer. Yeah. And then the next question, what kind of skills are you looking for? Now, in pecking order, if you look at the recent, survey outcome by the World Economic Forum 2020, you know, um, employees are no longer looking for only deep functional expertise, right? Like I said, everything is being outsourced right now, right? So what they want is, yes, they want deep functional expertise, but if you have deep functional expertise which you are getting from the traditional, linear based education, you're not going to go a long way. You might not be employed, because right now transferable skills are equally important given the VUCA world that we live in, right? And if you ask any CXOs, you ask any leaders, what kind of people do you want? The first answer would be, I want people who are creative. Because in this age of disruption, you need people to think, rethink, learn, unlearn, right? So you need the creative guys out there. You need people who are able to solve complex problem. You need people who are resilient, right? Given the uncertainty out there. And whether we like it or not, that's the way going forward. So yes, students graduating from liberal arts, right, liberal education, I would say, would embrace all this quality, right, including great communication skills, both written and verbal, and henceforth their ability to land a job and be successful in multiple jobs and multiple projects is much more higher than someone who has just linear education, right? But yes, obviously there are some disciplines like medicine, engineering, where you definitely have to pursue, you have to make up your mind early and embrace that journey. But keeping those specialized areas outside, I think liberal arts students would be in great demand, and then they would be more preferred. That's my answer to that question.
Thank you, Dr. Kamdar. Unfortunately, we have to now finish for today. I would like to call upon my colleague. And firstly, let me thank Dr. Kathleen, Dr. Ghosh, and Dr. Kamdar. And now I would like to call upon my colleague Sachin. Sachin is going to give a quick thank you note, and I can't thank you. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. So thank you very much. Thank you. Sachin, I think you're muted.
I'm really sorry for that.
That's fine.
So, thank you, Shubhayu. So I think we've had a great discussion around various aspects of liberal arts or liberal studies, as Dr. Ghosh mentioned, education, and then we deliberated on how the liberal arts and humanities as a discipline was taken some time back, what are the challenges associated with it, and how it is going to be extremely relevant in the changing scenario. We also deliberated on the importance of research, and more importantly, the research at undergraduate level and in liberal arts and humanities, and how the leadership, the resources, and the faculty members play an extremely important role in fostering and continuing the culture of research, and also how the faculty members can be motivated to focus on research. We also dwelt upon the importance of multidisciplinary approach for solving real world problems, and the ability to unlearn and relearn amongst the students, and how these skills play a very important role in life, be it the employability or be it the succeeding in life in general. So I think the discussion was very useful for everyone who is attending this event. And also to share, we at QSI Gauge have recently launched subject ratings in 11 different subject areas, including liberal arts and humanities. And that is the result of the continuous endeavor to support educational institutions by providing a platform to showcase their strength, and also help the prospective students by providing a tool with which they can actually evaluate the institute in that specific subject area. So we believe that subjectivity is going to add lots of value to the entire ecosystem. So with this, and on behalf of the entire QS iGage team and the audience, I like to thank Dr. Rupa Manjari Ghosh, Dr. Dishan Kamdar, and Professor Kathleen for taking out time and coming on this panel and sharing their valuable thoughts with us. And audience, while you are here, please subscribe to this YouTube channel as well, so that you remain updated on all the forthcoming events of QSI Gauge. With this, we come to an end of this session, and thank you very much for taking our time for attending this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, really.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.